Uh, Students, welcome again. Mirza sir, Gaude sir, uh, thanks for that such a big introduction. And let us go through our course. So, agenda. Uh, for today, we have a few points to be discussed. Uh, why and when context traces, a brief history of theory of context traces, then difference between compressive and context traces, theory of context traces, context traces in sphere on a sphere, context traces for cylinder on a cylinder, and context trace failure examples we'll discuss few like rails or prop shafts. Then we'll see the context trace effect on stress hardening, context trace effect on material hardness, then few additional cases as a discussion we'll see. Okay. I think those who have their microphones on can please put on mute so that there is less background noise.
Yes, yes, done.
Okay, so why and when context traces? That is the question. So when there are compressive forces between two elastic bodies having significant contact area between them, it is normally a case of simple compressive stresses. Just for example, a box kept on a table or fastened joints, they come together and they have compressive stresses in between them. But when a very tiny area of two objects is subjected to heavy compressive forces, the behavior of the objects is totally different than normal compressive stress condition. Now, if you have done any pre-study, I don't know when it was decided, like, or maybe Mirza sir might have told you that there will be a lecture on this topic and it will be by some external faculty. So I think you must have done some pre-study about the topic. So, okay, in a way it is good also. So if you have done any pre-study, you must have come across various theories, and most often they start with the examples of a sphere on a sphere or cylinder on a cylinder, etc., etc. So why it is so? Can anybody tell or try? I think there are almost 12, 14 people are there, but excluding two professors, at least 12 students are there, I think. Can anybody try this? Why it is
So,
always like theory starts with a cylinder on a cylinder or sphere on sphere?
sir, I think most of the mechanical parts, if we see cams
Okay,
or shafts, those have the cylindrical
because a
contact.
condition of large forces and very small contact area occurs only in those cases. Okay, so whenever you have such cases where actually there is interaction between curved surfaces, you can say, or some flat surface and curved surface. So these are the conditions where you get a very small contact area between those two contacting bodies, and there is considerably high contact force. So that is why always a contact stress theory starts with such examples. Okay. More precisely, there is condition occurs only when you have two bodies having curvature surface, or at least one body should have flat surface and other should have curved surface. That is the precondition where you will get the situation of contact stresses. Next, so what could be practical examples of such conditions? There are few listed: two mating gears, ball or roller bearings, cam and follower, railroad and wagon wheels. These are some examples where you can see either both the bodies are curved or one of them is flat and the other one is curved. So when you have two curved bodies or one flat and one curved body, there is very small contact area between those two bodies and there is a large amount of force. So can a rocking chair or a heavy truck tire with rods can be example of contact stresses? You know rocking chair, the half circle chair in which you sit and you do front and back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can it be example of contact stresses or a
Yes, sir.
truck with heavy load traveling on a road? Can it be example of contact stresses? Okay, actually the answer is no. Why? Because it doesn't satisfy two essential conditions which are necessary for contact stresses condition. The first is large amount of force and second is very small contact area. So these are the very essential conditions which are required for the case of contact stresses. Otherwise, it becomes a condition of normal compressive stresses. Okay. Okay, so let us go into a brief history about the theory of contact stresses. The original work in contact mechanics dates back to 1881 with the publication of the paper on the contact of elastic solids by Heinrich Hertz. Hertz was attempting to understand how the optical properties of multiple stacked lenses might change with the force holding them together. So Hertzian contact stresses refer to the localized stresses that develop as two curved surfaces come in contact and deform slightly under the imposed loads. Hertzian contact stresses form the foundation for the equations of load bearing capabilities and fatigue life in bearing, gear, and any other bodies where two surfaces are in contact. It was not until nearly 100 years later that Johnson, Kendall, and Roberts found a similar solution for the case of adhesive contact. This theory was rejected by Boris Gergin and co-workers who proposed a different theory.
Yes, now screen is completely visible. Pramod, if you switch to the this full screen mode, it will be better.
So this is not the proper listen. What right now?
No, it is there, but
Okay, so I think we have covered this. Maybe because of yeah. So the Johnson, Kendall and Roberts theory was rejected by Boris Jargon and co-workers who proposed a different theory of adhesion in 1970s. The Jargon model came to be known as DMT, that is Jargon, Muller and Topo model, and the Johnson and others model came to be known as JKR model for adhesive elastic contacts. So one was proposed and that was rejected by the other group of scientists. And actually what happened, this rejection proved to be instrumental in the development of Tabor and later Mogis parameters that quantify which contact model represent adhesive contact better for specific materials. So in case of adhesive contacts, originally both the models were correct, but both the models were correct for certain specific group of adhesive contacts. And that was not known to the people who discovered that models. So later on, it was discovered by Tabor and Maguis, and they suggested that both the models are correct, but one model is correct for certain group of adhesive contacts and another model is good for another type of adhesive contacts. Further advancement in the field of contact mechanics in the mid 20th century may be attributed to the names such as Bowden and Tabor. Bowden and Tabor were the first to emphasize the importance of surface roughness for bodies in contact. Through investigation of the surface roughness, the true contact area between friction partners is found to be less than the apparent contact area. Such understanding also drastically changed the direction of undertakings in tribology. The work of Bowden and Tabor yielded several theories in contact mechanics of rough surfaces. So actually we'll go further, and when we'll go further, you will come to know that originally when the contact stresses theory was developed by Hertz, there were certain assumptions done by him, and under those assumptions he developed his theory. But some of them were actually not the practical assumptions. One of the assumptions is like the surfaces are uh, having, say, no roughness or something of that sort. But practically, when you have two mating surfaces, they are having roughness. So there was a certain difference between the calculations if you do by Hertz approach and the actual, because with the advancement in the computers and advancement in the calculation methods with invention of the CAD and FEA and all, everything is becoming more and more what you can say analytical and accurate. So with accurate analysis, they come to know that there is difference between the Hertz assumptions and the actual results. So surface roughness is attributed to be one of the key element which makes that difference. So this guys, Bowden and Taylor, etc., did the work in that area. The contribution of Archer must also be mentioned in discussion of pioneering work in the field of contact stresses. Archer concluded that even for rough elastic surfaces, the contact area is approximately proportional to the normal force. So for the rough surfaces, the contact area is approximately proportional to the normal force. That was the finding of Archer. Further important insights along these lines were provided by Greenwood and Williamson, Bush, Person, etc. The main finding of these works were that the true contact surface in rough materials is generally proportional to the normal force, while the parameters of individual microcontacts are only weakly dependent upon the load. So these were the findings, and that is the brief history how the theory of contact stresses went on developing. Okay, so once again we'll understand difference between the compressive and the contact stresses. I think so far during this discussion you must have come to know the difference, but let us make it crystal clear with this diagram. As you can see here, this is the example where a block is resting on a bench or a table or on a surface. So in the figure A, you can see the block is kept on the table and the weight of the block is acting in the downward direction. It is mass into G. And in the B figure, you can see equivalent reaction is applied by the bench on the block, right? That is why the system is in equilibrium, right? So in the C, as you can see there is a stress distribution acting on the block. So how the stresses are acting? Stresses are acting on the all surface of the block which is in contact with the table, and the amount of force is uniform. See the red note there. Stress distribution is uniform throughout the contact area. So amount of stress that is acting upon the area is uniform. Now let us look at this picture. Here, as you can see, there is a what you can say a spherical object, spherical ball which is kept on a table in figure A, and F is the force that is acting on it. In the B, as you can see, an equivalent amount of reaction is provided by the table. But if you look carefully at figure C, you will come to know that the contact region between the spherical ball and the table is one small ring there at the bottom. And as you can see, the stresses that are acting there, the value of the stresses is different at each different point. Okay, but if you do the summation of all the stresses and multiply it by the area, you will get the value of force. So whenever you have a curved body and when it is in contact with a flat body, there will be a stress distribution which will not be uniform throughout the contact region. It will be different. So what is theory of contact stresses? There are certain points to be noted. Two bodies with one or both having curved surfaces. Initial, it's a point or line contact. When these bodies come in contact, they are either in the point contact or line contact depending upon their geometry. Say for example, if there is a roller or there is a cylinder and there is a flat surface or another cylinder, there will be a line contact. If there are two spheres or there is one a sphere and one flat plane, there will be a point contact. Okay, So initially it is a point or line contact that changes into area contact after application of the force. So that point contact gets changed into contact area after application of the force. Stresses developed are three-dimensional. These are contact or Hertzian stresses. So as we know, Hertz is the pioneer in the area of contact stresses. Many times the contact stresses are also called as Hertz stresses or Hertzian stresses. Assumptions of Hertz theory. What were the assumptions of the Hertz theory? 1. The materials in contact are homogeneous and their yield stresses are not exceeded. Second, contact stress is caused by the load which is normal to the contact tangent plane. Third, contact area is very small as compared to the dimensions of the contacting solids. Fourth, contacting solids are at the rest and in equilibrium. The effect of surface roughness is negligible. That is the assumptions of Hertz. So he simply neglects the surface roughness. Okay. So now we'll go into certain contact stress cases, and the first classic case is a sphere on sphere. So here, as you can see in A diagram, there are two spheres which are coming in contact with each other, and vertical is the Z axis, horizontal is the Y axis, and axis perpendicular to probably your screen or paper is the X axis. Force is acting F from the top. Two solid spheres of diameter D1 and D2 are pressed together with force F. Circular area of contact of radius A will be given by formula A is equal to cube root of 3F by 8 into bracket 1 minus nu 1 square upon E1 plus 1 minus nu 2 square upon E2 divided by 1 upon D1 plus 1 upon D2, where A is the radius of contact area. Here, as you can see, when two spherical balls are pressed over each other, due to the application of force, they will slightly deflect and the point contact will get converted into area contact. So there will be a circle at the tangent plane. At the y-axis, there will be formed a contact circle between the smaller and the bigger sphere. So what will be the size of that contact circle? So let us assume A is the radius of that contact circle. Then that A radius can be found out by this formula. Okay. So where A is the radius of contact area, F is the force acting on the sphere. D1 and D2 are the diameters of the smaller and the larger sphere. E1 and E2 are the modulus of elasticity, and nu1 and nu2 are the Poisson's ratio of the smaller and bigger spheres. So it essentially depends upon the force, the geometry, that is the diameter size, and the elastic properties. Modulus of elasticity and Poisson's ratio both are again elastic properties of the material. So essentially it will depend upon the amount of force the size of the components and the elastic property of those components which are in the system. These are the governing factors which will give us the contact radius. So the next is the pressure distribution. So pressure distribution is elliptical in shape. As you can see here, the pressure is half ellipse is in the smaller ball and half ellipse is distributed in the larger ball, and maximum pressure is at the center. Center is the major axis of that ellipse. So maximum pressure is at the center, and that is given by P max is equal to 3F upon 2 pi A square, where A is again radius, F is the force, and P max is the maximum pressure between the contact surfaces. All points within the spheres experience stresses, but the stresses along the z-axis are maximum. One of the illustration what we saw earlier, like a block kept on the table and the ball kept on a table. And in that illustration, if you remember, it was very clearly shown that the amount of forces or the reactions acting upon the ball are different at different points, but they are maximum at the axis of the force application. So along the axis where force F is acting, that is Z axis. So along the Z axis, the forces will be, or the stresses will be maximum. The value of such a stresses can be calculated as sigma x is equal to sigma y is equal to minus of P max into the bracket 1 minus Z upon A, tan inverse of 1 upon Z minus A, sorry, Z upon A, into bracket 1 plus nu minus 1 upon 2 into 1 plus Z square upon A square. And along Z, it is minus of P max into bracket 1 upon 1 plus Z square upon A square. These are the principal stresses at any point Z along the Z axis, where A is the radius of contact area, F is the force, P max is the maximum pressure between contact surfaces. Okay, so maximum shear stress. The maximum shear stress at the point of contact is given by equation tau xz is equal to tau yz is equal to 1 upon sigma x minus sigma z, that is equal to half of minus 1 plus 2 mu upon 2 plus 1 bracket complete into P max. So if we further simplify that, we get 1 minus 2 nu upon 4 P max. With new value, generally for the steel, it is 0.3. Tau xz and tau yz will be 0.1 of the P max. This being too small, 0.1 of the P max is the actually maximum shear stress that will be produced at the contact plane or contact point. So at the contact point, how much is the maximum shear stress developed? that is equal to 0.1 of the P max value. So 0.1 of the P max value is too small. It does not cause any yielding of material such as steel. You know, steel and all these are normally used in what you can say the contact cases, and they have already high yield stresses. Their properties are such that they are good against the yielding. So yielding of such material is not caused by just 0.1 times of the P max stresses, which depend upon shear stress for yielding. In fact, so ductile materials generally depend upon the shear stress for yielding. In fact, the maximum shear stress occurs inside the sphere at approximately half the distance of the radius of the contact area. This point must be considered as the weaker point in such materials as steels. So actually what happens, the maximum shear stress, you can see here, this is the plot of sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, and tau xy and tau yz, that is the shear stresses. So as you can see here, sigma x, sigma y or sigma z, they so these curves sigma x, sigma y, these are the sigma values, the sigma value, and these are the z values. So at certain z values, they start drastically. Okay, so here, as we saw that the shear stress developed is just a 0.1 times of the P max, and that is not enough to do anything wrong with the materials like a steel. So here further, if we go, uh, we have a plot of sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, and tau xz, tau yz. So the maximum shear stress for nu is equal to 0.3 is at about 0.31 of the P max values. As you can see, for the sigma x, sigma y, and sigma z, the hello.
Pramod, yes, yes, you are audible.
Hello.
Pramod, you are audible. Go ahead.
Hello.
Pramod, you are audible. Go ahead.
Okay. So as you can see here, sigma z is roughly say 1.1 times of the P max at the contact plane. This is the contact plane axis, and this is the z axis, vertical axis. These are the stresses plot. So along the contact plane, sigma z is say roughly 1.1, and therefrom as you go along deep along the z axis, it goes on decreasing. Similarly, say a 0.85 is the sigma x, sigma y, and it drastically goes on decreasing. But if you see tau xz, tau yz, it starts roughly at 0.1 of the P max. It goes on increasing. So roughly at the 0.48, it is maximum 0.48 of the Z and 0.3 of the P max. So here it is 0.31. Okay, so 0.31 of the P max, and at the Z, of say 0.48, it is maximum, and then it starts decreasing. So this is very, very interesting phenomena as far as the context traces are concerned. It is suggested that cracks originate at this point below the surface and progress to the surface. So what happens is, in case of the context traces, because of this property, the tau max occurs below the surface. And since the tau max occurs below the surface, the failure starts from the below the surface. Okay. Say for example, by this time you must have come to know bearing is one of the examples where the context traces comes. Okay. And now you imagine that bearing is heavily loaded. There is a heavy load on the shaft, and that shaft is fit between the bearing. There is a large amount of load on the rollers. The rollers are creating such a large amount of context trace below the surface, and there is also lubricant present in the bearing, like maybe the grease or the oil. And because of large contact forces, the same lubricant will be forced with high pressure into those small cracks, and those cracks, see here, the lubricant which is under pressure enters the fine crack and wedges the chip loose. So it further, what you can say, adds to the complication of the problem, and it further helps the chips to come out. So fatigue failure, such a fatigue failure below the surface leads to pitting and spalling. It is called as pitting or spalling. Let's see one common example of pitting failure that is typically caused by occurrence of maximum shear stress below contact surface. This will help you to understand cause and effect. See here. Can you see that bearing race on the top that has got small pits, a small, what you can say, pin-like holes on the surface that are created because of context traces or the tau max, which is causing at how much? Tau max is causing at where it is causing? It is 0.3 times of the P max and roughly at 0.48 of the Z. So it is causing below the surface, and that is why you can see there are small pinholes or the pit holes which are caused because of such a failure below the surface. The bottom picture, as you can see here, see this is the top surface, and as you can see this crack which is developed like a half round crack is developed at the bottom. It has initiated at the bottom and gradually it has started propagating towards the surface from the both sides. Similarly, here you can see the crack is developed at the bottom. The crack is developed at the bottom and gradually it starts coming on the top, and after certain time when it reaches to the top from the both end or from all the three, this is just one section. So you see here 2D, it will be like a pothole. You know, a deep cooking pan in the home you must have seen. So there is a small cooking pan like portion which is removed away from the parent material. And as I told you earlier, the lubrication process further helps this. Okay. So the next case is a cylinder on cylinder. Now I don't think anybody of you have a question regarding why we are studying this cylinder on cylinder or a sphere on a sphere. So when there are two cylinders in contact, you consider this case where again y is the plane where they are coming in the contact, z is the vertical axis along which the forces act, and x is the axis along the perpendicular to your screen, that is the x-axis. So that is the xyz coordinate system. F is the force which is acting. There is F reaction from here. Again here what will happen? Initially there will be a line contact between these two cylinders. And once you apply the force, it will turn into probably a small rectangle. Okay. So the rectangle will be, say here is the B is the half of the width of the rectangle. So twice of the B into the length of the cylinder. The shortest length of the either cylinder, to be more specific, will be if both the cylinder are equal length, then the length of the cylinder multiplied by twice of the B will be the rectangular contact area between these two cylinders pushed one upon another. Again, here the stress pattern will be again elliptical. The maximum stress will always occur along the axis of the force application, that is F. So that is Z axis in our coordinate system. So the half width B of the rectangle area of contact is given by formula. B is equal to square root of 2F upon pi L 1 minus nu 1 square upon E1 plus 1 minus nu 2 square upon E2 upon 1 upon D1 plus D2. So here again you know all these properties. B is the half width of the contact area, F is the force, D1 and D2 are the diameter of the small and large cylinder, E1 and E2 are the moduli of elasticity for small and large cylinder, and nu1 and nu2 are the Poisson's ratio of small and large cylinder. L is the length of the cylinders. So the contact area again largely depends upon the geometric properties, that is the diameters and the elastic properties of the materials that are coming in contact with each other. The maximum pressure, that is compressive stress sigma max, which occurs along the middle line of the contact area, and that is P max, which is given by 2F upon pi BL, where B is the half width, F is the force, L is the length of the cylinders. Equations for B and P max are general and are applicable to both cylinders. If a cylinder of the diameter D1 presses on a plate, then D2 will become infinite. And if the cylinder is in contact with a hollow cylinder of diameter D2, then D2 will become a negative radius. So this will be probably a case with a race and a roller in the bearing. A wheel pressing on rail is the case of D2 is equal to infinite, and D2 is equal to negative will be the case of a bearing and a roller. The state of stress along the Z axis for two cylinder is given by sigma x is equal to minus of 2 nu p max into bracket square root of 1 plus z square upon b square bracket complete minus of z upon b bracket complete. Sigma y is equal to minus of p max into bracket 2 minus 1 upon 1 plus z square upon b square bracket complete square root of 1 plus z square upon b square minus 2z upon b bracket complete. And sigma z will be minus of p max into 1 upon square root of 1 plus z square upon b square. So this will be the sigma x, sigma y and sigma z formula. There are very big derivations of this. If anybody is interested, I can provide you the link. You can go through it. It's like almost 60, I think 60 or 70 pages. But if you are interested, you can definitely go through that. Here Z is equal to distance of a point from contact point. Now again, if we have similar plot of the stress properties for the case of cylinder, it looks like this. Here you can see again sigma Z, sigma X and sigma Y. So they are roughly say 0.9 of the P max, and as you go, they drastically goes on reducing. Again here tau, if you see, tau is roughly 0.3 of the P max and it is maximum at 0.78 of the depth. So that is where the maximum shear stress occurs. So when there will be cylinder and cylinder in contact, roughly therefrom the failure will start. Now these are the stress plots. For a cylinder on a cylinder, as you can see, roughly 0.78 deep below is this is the maximum stress area, which is the hotspot. Here you can see the scale. The blue is the lesser stress areas, and as you go on turning it to the yellow, it is the maximum stress area. So all this at the surface you can see on the edges there are blues, there are certain greens at the center, but the yellow thing happens at 0.78 deep of the surface. So this is the hotspot. Normally in what I can say stress analysis language, it is called as hotspot, which occurs below the surface. Please note this condition will lead to initiation of pits from the bottom of the surface. Now this is just according to Hurd's theory. Okay, but many times what happens, that is not the condition. You have certain amount of friction there and there is a surface roughness also. So as you can see here, the stress distribution is again elliptical, but there is a huge spike here. That is because of asperity or the surface roughness, and it is offsetted. As you can see, these are like a uniform egg shaped roughly stress distribution lobes. Here the stress distribution lobe is disturbed and it has changed its shape and somewhat it is tending to come up at the surface at the middle. So just below the asperity or where there is a roughness, the stress tends to increase, and stress plot with friction added and also added surface asperity. Observe how stresses at surface are increased. So here the surface stresses are increased. And if you come across any failure which clearly shows you that the crack initiation was at the surface, then you must be able to understand that this is because of some asperities on the surface. This condition will lead to the initiation of pits from the surface. So as an engineer, if you look at the failure surface, you should be able to make the difference between where there is a failure because of pure contact stresses and where there is a case of combination of contact stresses and the surface roughness. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the nice study done by some foreign university, and this is applied to the bearings, and it is actually also used in the industry also. Here you can see the force application points and different types of rollers. The first one is the perfect cylinder. If you have a perfect cylinder where the load is applied and it is in contact with the surface, then what happens if it is at the center? There is a spike at the both ends, as you can see here. There is a spike. In this case, there is certain misalignment and the load application point shifts toward the inside. So here you can see the spike. So maybe if you come across certain failures where rather than at the center, if the failure is on the edges or it is on the one edge, you should be able to make out the difference that this is because of the geometry associated with the rollers and maybe because of the load application point which has shifted. So crown rollers. So sometimes what happens to avoid such a spike, crowning of the rollers is done. That is, rollers are provided with a certain spherical radius on its diameter. And because of that, you can see the contact stresses are occurring right at the middle. Okay. If the forces are heavier, still the pattern is same. The distribution has increased. If the forces are unbalanced and if they are at the one side, then there is again spike. So rollers with chamfer. So if the same condition, there is a chamfer added to the rollers and there is a smaller load which is acting at right the middle, the contact pattern is very good here. You can see if the load is heavy, again at the chamfer edge, spikes occurs. If the load is offsetted below the load application point, there spikes occurs. And these are the logarithmic rollers. So the shape is logarithmic. In this case, the spikes are avoided even in case of the offset load. So normally this is the case which is preferred for the roller designs in the bearing. Again, it depends upon the bearing manufacturer or the bearing application and many other factors. But normally this is the case where logarithmic rollers are always preferred. Okay, so I think now let us see some practical examples of the failure of the context traces. Rails. The rails are very common example of the context traces, and here you can see the spelling of the rail because of the context traces. Here you can see, as we could see in the earlier stress plot, how the hotspot is developed below the surface and then it goes on propagating and it causes the failure. So in case of rails, apart from the hotspot which is below the surface, which is caused purely because of the context traces, but rails are heavy materials, and these material have sometimes what you can say impurities in it, or say some what you can say some air pockets or some carbon
Defects.
flakes, surface. Hello.
Defects.
Yeah. So all such internal defects are available there. So these internal defects can also help to accelerate the propagation of the crack, which is developed at the bottom, and ultimately it ends into the failure of the rail. So context trace example, one of the very common example that we personally tackle is propeller shaft bearings. So in the propeller shaft at the universal joint or at the hooks joint, there is a spider and two yokes are attached around that spider, and there is a bearing. See, this is a spider portion. It's like a plus sign, right? So this is one arm of that plus sign, and this is the bearing which is normally fitted on this. And over this, the yoke comes. So these are the rollers which come in contact with this OD of the spider. Normally this is called as trunnion. Okay. So on this trunnion, you can see the spalling. Spalling is the result of surface or subsurface fatigue, which causes fracture to the form in the running surfaces. So this is a practical example, practical photograph where you can see because of the spalling, this has spoiled. It was like a mirror finish here at the root. You can see somewhat mirror finish area. So it was like a mirror finish, very nice trunnion with very nice surface finish control, hardness control, everything in place. But after usage, this has turned into such a worst case. This is one of the failure example due to context traces. There is one more interesting paper across which I come. This is determination of permissible context traces of case hardened raceway of roller slewing bearing. This is a paper written by Li Yanfeng and Jia Li. I will hand over this paper to you, or maybe Mirza sir, you can read this paper. There are very interesting conclusions. The following can be seen from the calculated raceway permissible stresses. One is permissible context trace decreases slightly with the increase of the roller diameter. So as the roller diameter increases, the permissible contact stress slightly decreases. Number two, permissible contact stress increases with the increase in the case depth significantly. So as you go on increasing the uh, uh, case depth of the hardened material, it significantly improves the permissible contact stress values. As the case depth reaches 6 millimeter, the maximum permissible contact stress is 3758 megapascal, which reaches to the 93.96, say roughly 94% of the permissible contact stress of 4000 megapascal. So what they have done is they have studied comparatively one fully hardened raceway and its allowable context trace value they have this as a comparison parameter. So when you have through hardened raceway with permissible context trace of 4000 megapascal for the same material, they started experimenting and they did case hardening up to 6 millimeters of the depth, and they checked for the permissible context trace. So they found it at the 6 millimeter of the case depth hardening. They can reach up to 3758 megapascal, which is roughly 94% of the true hardened value. Similarly, as the case depth reaches to 7 millimeter from 6 millimeter earlier, it reaches to 7 millimeter. Then the permissible contact stress is 3889, and which is roughly 97% of the 4000 megapascal, which is the benchmark value for them. Okay, so what they try to establish is as the case depth goes on increasing, you can get more and more life, and even without thoroughly hardening the raceway, if you just case harden it to some optimum case depth values, that can also help you to get the almost 100% what you can say life for that particular bearings. So this may help in uh, economizing the manufacturing processes. Such a study may help. This is one of the typical plots where you can see there are hardness values on the horizontal axis and there are allowable context shear stresses on the vertical axis. As you can see, for the different material, as the hardness goes on increasing, the allowable contact shear stress values also go on increasing. So yes, actually there is always a direct relationship between the hardness of the material and the allowable contact stresses. This is one of very typical example. This is ball bearing. This is the inner race. These are the balls. This is the outer race. And suppose force is acting like this on vertically downwards. It is maximum on this ball, and these two balls also share some loads, but it is maximum at the ball which is at the bottom of the force application direction. You can see here the stress plot. The blue is the higher stresses here. This is again one context stress distribution examples. Observe here that this is n is equal to 20 and here n is equal to 36. I mean to say here there are 20 number of teeth pinion. This is 36 number of teeth pinion. As the number of teeth increases, you can see the stresses are increasing. So the tooth size becomes smaller and it leads to the increase in stresses. This is one example of rails and wheels where there are contact stresses between the rail and the wheel at the point of contact. This is one of the cam and follower examples. So just one passing question. Can you identify this particular shape of the cam? Have you seen this anywhere in your daily life? Anybody? I hope at the childhood some people must have gone to that.
Prashant, have you seen anywhere this kind of camp? Anybody can answer.
Your answers in Marathi are also welcome.
Sir has given actually the hint for you.
Yes.
Rahul,
Being mechanical engineer, actually your eyes should be always open. Or if you are not mechanical engineer at your childhood, when you become mechanical engineer, you should be always able to correlate the things whatever you have seen to the your knowledge what you are gaining during your graduation or post graduation. Then only you will be able to become good engineer. You should keep your eyes and ears always open. You should always look at the things and then you should try to correlate them to your classroom trainings, whatever you get from your FE to B or ME or MTech or whatever. Then only it is useful education. Otherwise, it's not. Okay, so Mirza sir, there are Marathi people in this class or not?
Yes, sir. I mean, most of them know the Marathi.
Okay, great. सो लहानपणी तुम्ही स्वतः गेला असाल किंवा तुमच्या आई बरोबर डंग असतो मिरची कांडपचा तिथे गेला असाल तर तिथं हे कॅम्प मेकॅनिझम तुम्ही पाहिलं असेल सगळ्यात लेफ्ट वाले जे आहे ते मिरची कांडप केंद्र मसाला मिरची डंग असं काहीतरी असेल तर तिथे तुम्ही हे पाहिलेलं असेल पण ते उघड्या डोळ्यांनी तेव्हा पाहायचं असतं आणि जेव्हा आपण इंजिनियर म्हणून जे नॉलेज घेत असतो तेव्हा ते तिथं कोरिलेट करायचं असतं आपण तिथं काय करायचं असतं यू हॅव टू रेज दॅट iron rod through certain height and then suddenly drop it, right?
Yes, sir. Right.
So this cam will give you that desired result, right?
Yes, sir. Right.
On the extreme right, you can see this cam, which will give you smooth rise and smooth fall.
Mhm.
On the extreme right, whatever cam and follower you see, this will give you, it's like a eccentric, right? So to smoothly rise and smoothly fall. This will suddenly rise and suddenly fall. So this is useful for you when you are designing a dung masala machine.
Yes,
Try
sir.
to design. Okay,
The second one
great.
is a camera.
Yes. Okay. So a future scope, since all of you are studying your postgraduate course, there is lot of scope in this area. You can work. Uh, there are certain points that I have identified and suggested here, but these are not limited. There is literally infinite opportunity in this area to work. Effect of material hardness. It is already studied by some people, but still there is a scope. Effect of case depth. I have given one paper example there, but still there is a lot of scope. Effect of different material combinations, such as bearing ball and roller material and different raceway material. Like, can you combine some different material for the raceways and different material for the balls? And can you get, higher life of the bearing or something like that? VAV in the rails, like removing some elliptical slots from the rail web and optimizing the rail width, etc. This is one of the areas you can explore. Any super elastic material coating on the mating parts to improve the contact area. So as you know, when you press two balls against each other, because of their own material elasticity, they will expand and they will create a contact area between them. So as you will have more and more soft or ductile materials, there will be more and more larger area will be formed. As you have harder and harder materials, there will be lesser and lesser area formed, right? Are you able to understand this? But if you develop certain coating on certain ball, where if it comes in contact and if there is a large amount of force, that will help to increase the contact area. And once the force is removed, it will go back to its original shape and size, whatever. So you can think on these lines also. So these are some areas which is I have kept just as a what you can say uh, thought or as a feed for your brain. You can further explore in this area. This is very interesting area, and as I shown you the example of actually gears and example of say the propeller shaft spider and its bearing. These are our daily problems that we face. So it is very interesting. So please explore and try to put in what you can say your contribution in that. So that's all from my end actually. Thank you all of you. Over to you, Mirza sir.
Thank you very much, Pramod. Actually, really nice session. And as expected, you have given some topics also for the students for their actually